Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first symposium digital session powered by Kona. I have two fabulous creative minds with me today, Arik Levy and Rooshad Shroff, and it's my absolute honor to be in conversation with them. Both Arik and Rooshad have been creatives who have been very, very keen to have at symposium, although I would have liked to have them at the physical version at NSIC grounds in New Delhi. Unfortunately, I have them only digitally today, but I'm so glad that they both have finally agreed to be a part of symposium. So thank you, Rooshad, and thank you, Arik. Before I kickstart my session, just a little introduction about both of them. An artist, photographer, designer, Arik Levy is a multidisciplinary designer whose work can be seen in the prestigious galleries and museums worldwide. He's best known for his rock sculptures composed of mirror polished stainless steel. Considering himself more of a feeling artist, Arik continues to contribute substantially to our interior and exterior milieu, as well as complete environments that can be adapted for multi use. According to Arik, life is a system of signs and symbols when nothing is quite as it seems. The Israeli born designer believes creation is an uncontrolled muscle. Rooshad is an architect, designer, and architect, interior designer, and product designer based out of Mumbai. His practice spans across architecture, interiors, and bespoke furniture. Over the years, as we all know, he has carved out a niche for himself based on the philosophy of integrated design, with a special focus on artisanry and high end luxury. Since 2013, he has been showcasing and collaborating with several brands and prestigious exhibitions and art shows, including the London Craft Week and Ambiente. Rusha champions the cause and romantic appeal of handmade, investing considerable time and effort into extensive research and experimentation with century old techniques to introduce novel products and finishes. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of ID Symposium. I cannot tell you how happy I am to just see the two of you together on screen. And I'm sure there are so many other architect designer friends of ours who are watching and they're equally excited. So I'm going to throw open my question first to Arik. Arik, when I was putting your introduction together, I also mentioned you always say life is a system of signs and symbols where nothing is quite as it seems. Tell me about this philosophy. How does this find space in your work, and why do you feel like this?
Well, I think today more than any other time before, it is true because nothing is exactly what it seems to be. And but when we practice art or design or any form of creativity, we are actually very much now and here. So there is a contradiction, it's sort of like a time lapse between what we do and when we're doing it, and when it will be existing, what it's going to show and what it's going to convey to the people that interact with it, whether it is a product or an art piece or a video or photography. So there is this very little gap between what we see and what we understand, what we hear and what we feel, what we think we feel and what we actually really felt. And this is where I am. I am in that little gap, trying at least to be, to inject my own one DNA, one gene into this gigantic DNA of who we are and how we are, and hopefully enhance people's life in this way or another. But get this bridge starting to grow from both sides, and then I can walk on one side and other people can go on the other side, and then eventually we meet or we just cross each other and each one goes to another place. So this is how actually I feel, and also the creative process is influenced by this, or I am influenced by the actual fact that things are not exactly what they are. I'm looking at you, but behind us, this fantastic trees in the garden of the studio, and yeah. So you are here, I mean, here, but not here. They are there, but I can't reach, but I hear and smell, and so on. So I think it engages this sort of idea engages all our senses, and I would like to undo everything which is too evident and let what is not evident comes through. So if you close your eyes now, you probably hear me better because we are so focused on our eyes these days. And if you close your eyes and ears, maybe you can even smell. what we can't do through for the moment through this computer stuff. So voila,
Right.
this is how it happening for me.
I'm so glad you touched upon the process because Rushad, I want to first talk to you about the whole thing. The reason why I got you two gentlemen together on this panel discussion was that both of you work across spectrums. You just are not only doing architecture. I mean, it's everything, right? From products to art to spaces to everything that comes under the design umbrella, literally. Rushad, what made you kind of, stretch your definition? Why everything and why just not focus on one thing? What is your process like? Is it something very similar to Arik's? Tell us a little about that.
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Kamna. Also, I mean, when I started off, though trained as an architect, almost the way it kind of started off was quite organic. I wasn't particularly planning on branching out into different fields. And when I moved back to India, it was more to keep myself busy that I kind of looked at product design. There was always an interest in furniture, but never really one that I had a formal training in or wanted to pursue as a career. It was much more of a pet project. It was more to understand materials and techniques of making as against actually the final product. So when I started, it was really to investigate craft and techniques of making, to also understand products from the angle of the materiality of things. So also, what would be breaking points of certain materials? How can we push the limits of either the material itself or the technique of making? And that kind of helped me to kind of get into, say, the furniture product, which then translated into, say, an interior project, whether it would be a bespoke finish or a wall cladding, etc. So it was much more about that process of investigation as against it was really to define it as I want to do product or furniture and make that kind of a differentiator between each field.
Arik, what about you? I mean, what is the process like? Like, is the process different when you're doing art versus when you're doing a and versus when you're doing a decor product? Tell me a little about that.
Well, I think there's no one. There is at least for me, there isn't one methodology that I'm using. There's no one ruler. There's no one pan or a sequence of things to do. I mean, at the production fabrication part of things, yes, of course, but at the conceiving the project, there isn't really. Every project ignites from different reasons and a different time and moment of who I am and where I am and what is the client and if there is one. So it's more about adapting. I think it is for me creativity today. Since ever, it's more about adapting the tools to the actual action that we need to do, and not creating a path of which we log in. Some of what is taught in school somehow. This is the process. You do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, and then at the end you have the product or the render or whatever it is. By practicing fine arts, which is excuse me to correct you, it's not coming under the umbrella of design because design is design and art is art. It's two different things. They might influence from the same things, but they're not the same thing. But practicing both allows me to jump from one field to the other field of thoughts, not necessarily field of. So one can say on one side it could be, or at one point it could be mind over matter, which is different than Rooshad, what you said before. But on the other hand, you can drop into a project where they do that in this technique and in this way, and that's what you should deal with. And you have to deal with it in a creative way, in a new way, in a provocative way, in a way that gives them a road to market or to future of what they are. Design solves problems. Solving problems is not only one channel. There's so many different channels. Sometimes the problem of a physical object is actually a mental thought. Sometimes, sometimes vice versa. It's also today where we are facing more and more completely algorithm or software that are managing so much So we can't really, at the end, just associate with the material itself. On the other hand, when you bite an apple, there's no algorithm there. You bite the apple, and then you look at the apple and say, "Wow!" And then the juice is coming in your mouth, and it's this all sensorial thing going on. No algorithm will replace this, at least not for now. Before I'm gonna have a chip in my brain and then I'm not gonna exist. We're just gonna be chips. So this is this is why I cannot answer your question with one golden rule. Say if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 7, 8, 9, you will get to 10. Maybe not, but maybe you shouldn't get to 10, or maybe the way of getting to 10 is most important than 10 itself.
Right. You know, one thing that I notice in both your works, while you guys work in very different contexts and very different geographies, one thing that's my personal observation, that there's a unique sensory quality that comes out with each of your work, whether it's product, space. It's simple, but it's still so impactful, and there is always this emotion that it evokes. Is that something that you guys are thinking of when you're designing? Like, does the whole thought of designing for emotions play any sort of a role when you're sitting at the design table?
I've
Rooshad, you
been,
want to go first on this?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, sorry,
uh,
Arik.
Go ahead, please.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to say that long time ago I invented this expression that I called emotional ergonomics. Okay, I'll let you speak, Rooshad. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I'm quite often criticized that I'm devoid of emotions. I don't particularly design a sense that from an emotional standpoint, but of course, every object or every space has evoked some kind of a feeling, whether it would be, different kind of moods, etc. So it's something that you cannot shy away from. And quite recently, also like the fact that I like to branch out into different aspects of design. It's also because when I look at a space, it also is to kind of look at the entire space holistically, whether it's like the from smallest thing that one touches or interacts with, even the way in which a place smells. That was the reason why last year we launched a candle as well, because I thought it would be quite important to even work with the idea of having our own scent that kind of reflects the kind of work that we do or the materials that we play with, and also have an extension of a space. You can have a beautiful space, but if it doesn't smell good, you're uncomfortable in that space. So of course
Can you
there
see
are
the
things
corner,
like this
little
which,
corner? I still have your candle here. Sorry, I'm just interrupting. I have it right there, by the way.
yeah, great. I hope it's on.
It is.
But no, so yeah. So I think that becomes quite important in that sense because, whether you do it consciously or not, of course, there are certain factors that, create a mood and an environment, and even a chair can evoke that kind of feeling. So, yeah, I think it does play a very important part.
Thank
Totally.
you.
I
What's
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you speak, and I can imagine a person from India, of any you, if you don't, we don't see the people and say India is just like an amazing place of spirituality and color and incense and wow, and it's like it's a 10 lifetimes of feelings that every fraction of a second find yourself in Harvard, like the total contra opposition of that is Anglo-Saxon strictness and so on. So I, I see, and I totally agree with you. There's no way to get away from that, or to isolate the solutions from the actual feelings, and what a color influence your whole state of mind. Now, when you want to, so this is why minimalism is so complicated at the end and not so minimal, because it doesn't give you any point of reference. Minimalism, if you look at a building done in ancient Rome or in India or in Paris or in the 16th century and so on, when you look at a building today, which we like to call minimalist, right? It's actually boring. It isn't. It has no detail for the eye. All the craft is gone. It's all about, and you would hear some of the people say, "Yeah, I wanted to have nothing." It's quite a lot of work and intensity and investment, being it in human energy and finance and land and kilojoule and whatever it involves to have nothing. So I can't we can't say it's nothing, but the charge that we can give with the flame of a candle to a place, which is maybe, so you take a gallery. This is what's so great in a gallery. It's this white cube, right? It has nothing there except what you put in. So if you have a podium with a one candle on it, then the candle is the whole thing. Is how intense the whole relationship gets. But in our everyday life product, from our everyday environment, we don't have it's so rich in every possible way. I mean, look, I look at myself in the picture and I said, there's so many things going on, but I still manage to, I still, and you and you and so we still manage we have a system of selection, automated, controlled or uncontrolled, in our brain that gives us the possibility to associate with one little thing that brings you a memory from one day, maybe out there in a mountain or with a place, with a friend or with a trip or, whatever it is. So I think memories and souvenirs, collective and personal, come into interaction with materiality, space, colors, textures, and so on.
Tell me, what role does materiality play in your designs? Like, I really want to know this. What is it that you do first? Do you design first and then select the apt material to give shape to the design, or is it vice versa? Is it the material first and then comes the design? What is that process like? Because both of you clearly love to play with the most simplest materials but make it look something really outstanding. What's that like?
You're doing it
Sure. I
more.
mean, yeah, I touched upon it earlier as well. And for sure, for me, it's the material. Whether it's wood or marble, marble is something that I'm absolutely obsessed with. And it's really about how far we can push a particular material, whether it is in the process of carving it to a particular thinness, which we've done with our light collection, or whether, we kind of sculpt larger pieces of marble and make larger furniture pieces out of it. So it was really when we started off also understanding what marble can do, kind of seeing where the breaking point of that material was in terms of its, I mean, it's a monolithic stone, yet it is so fragile. It's heavy and robust. But yes, it's very unforgiving. So, like in terms of the smallest mistakes, it's not like wood where you can kind of work around it as well. So it's really about studying the material, studying the technique in which it could be worked in, especially because we work with the handmade to really understand what those old techniques of craft are and how do we make them much more contemporary in today's time, still kind of marrying the old and yet sometimes even with technology. So kind of seeing how technology could aid the craft. So then certain things that don't always have to be handmade for the sake of being handmade, but also seeing how current fabrication techniques or tools can aid, whether it's the design process that works with the technique of technology, or whether it aids in terms of even getting it manufactured, yet having the hand do certain things that the machine can't do.
Right.
Yeah, to get back to your question, it's purely material, and the byproduct of that research becomes the product.
Right. Arik?
Well, I have to say again that I don't have one track. At, at, at one time, it will be totally the material, but at others will be not. But however, if it is ending up being the material or not, of course, if you are working with a company's objects in wood, and so they're not gonna, or at least the discussion doesn't lead into making objects in pasta or in flour. So So you keep on working in wood. Now, how deep you research? How do you research? Where do you take this research to? What kind of additives you can put into it so this turns into something new? This is our work. Wood is wood. And, if you look at the tree, they more or less looks the same. There's a trunk and there's ramification and there's leaves and then there's flowers and then there's fruits if there is fruits and so on and so on. But what we do is we keep on transforming them. And I totally agree with you, Rooshad. What you said is that the technique and technology comes in to bring the craftsman basic material to start his job at that point. So if you have a piece of, have you been to Carrara, for example, to a place where they create marble? It's outstanding. You look at it and you cannot imagine they cut a piece of 10 meter by 5 meter by 2 meter. It's an insane block. The mass of this place just transform your whole body. So some materials have their radiating energy, and then they sort of magnet you into their DNA, and then you interact with this. Some materials have less of this, but they have more skin beauty, and then you deal with that. What was interesting for me in India, actually, I had quite a few, probably still have quite a few products made in India because we were looking for that specific hand, that specific craft, and so on. That the energy of the person who's making the object, the craftsman, is as important as the craft itself and as important as the material. So I would not want to personally reduce any of what I do into the material or to the color so I think it is, and I think people feel it and people interact with it whether they want or don't want. So feel before you see. I'll give you an example. We all say normally, you say, I think, right? You say, I was thinking, no. You say, I was feeling so good or so bad or whatever, right? So feel, think. Imagine what is going to be with I think, I feel. The whole parameters of our everyday reaction in life will change. And I think for the good, because we will start thinking with feelings and not being only mathematical to a certain kind of progress and so on, and start feeling with a thought. So this is where mind over matter comes in and say, that was an idea. So if you say this is a tape, okay, well that's a tape. It's glue, this kind of glue, that kind of glue. That's a tape. Finish. And if I tell you, I have this thing that I can assemble things together, and I can mark and I can draw with it. So now you have billion images where this is a tape. It's so boring, just being a tape, but it makes so many things, right? So this is where I am, where the potential, even if it is, even if it's a non-tangible potential of what I do, this is what's interesting me, because I think the more and more we can grasp on this, or the more we grasp on it, the more we get out of it. Some people get caught with their trip out of a piece of nothing. You see, look at a baby or a child that has no further references, like, or we're not so involved with the social system, financial system, geometric system, ecology, and so on. So it's just involved with his own self, and it takes this thing. And for him, it's the whole world. Plays with it for hours and looking at it and turning it and putting the hand in and the hand out. Wow, where is it? If I send you this as a present, Rooshad, right? You're going to tell your friend, oh, I got a present from Arik. It was a tape.
True.
If I send you a paper with a few words on it, you maybe going to think more than just about the tape. Even if I just wrote T-Y-P-E in the wrong order because I'm dyslexic and that's what's going to happen, it's going to make you or anyone else think more than. Anyway, parentheses.
Yeah.
Rushad, I have a question specifically
Yeah.
for you, and this is also because I've seen your body of work as well. You focus heavily on handmade, and I know it's a personal cause as well that you like to work with craftsmen. You like to involve them as much as you can in your work, and you try to weave in the local context in your design stories. But again, you achieve a very fine balance between the modern and the classical. Tell me, when did this become such an important part of your design ethos? Was it from the beginning? And what is it about this whole process that really excites you? Because I'm just going to take a little bit of a cue here from your Instagram stories that you keep posting, because there's so much of behind this scene that I keep seeing where you're working with local people, where you're really trying to bring their craft to the forefront. What's that process like? Because I don't know, people might not like me saying this, but you're really one of the very, very few designers out there in India who are genuinely walking the talk. Tell me, what is it? What is this like?
So, as I mentioned, when I moved back 10 years ago, close to 10 years ago, for not having anything to do, I decided to start with some kind of furniture work. And being trained in the West, I realized that when I came back, there was this whole field or like, a gold mine of craft and handmade and, different kind of crafts in India, which I've always grown up seeing, but I was kind of oblivious of it. And I shied away from it because probably I just didn't understand the potentials of that craft. Living around in India, you're quite often surrounded by very mediocre level of craft for various
Right.
reasons. Whether the craft's really reduced to almost a souvenir in that sense. So it was really being naive in terms of understanding the potentials of that craft that made me shy away from it. And when I moved back, I had the luxury of time that allowed me to do a little bit of research and kind of touched upon only one or two crafts that I had ease of access with. And the research, in a way, working with craft was also low investment at that point. I mean, it was really not so much about honestly going into craft because I loved it at that point, but it was something that just I had ease of access with. And the more I kind of went into it, studied it, and did R&D, it's something that I absolutely loved. And that's when I realized that, there are certain ways in which one kind of works and operates globally. And because of like fabrication techniques, etc., you kind of lose this sense of authorship. And authorship more, not so much as like the designer, but more in terms of like context, in terms of where it's getting made, who's making it, like the hand, or also of the craftsman. And that kind of got me interested in kind of understanding what working with crafts could be. And then slowly over the years, we took on one craft at a time, kind of really seeing who we can work with. And it was also like to identify the craft was not so much of, again, things that we kind of love or want to pursue, but also who we can work with. Working with craftsmen, I realized also it is that when you overcome the fear of failure with them, there's a whole new like vocabulary of design that kind of opens up because then they are working with you and not for you, and that kind of really helped us recreate certain things that we do. And then of course, having a formal training in the West for 10 years, my aesthetic kind of gravitates much more to that kind of a language. So I think that kind of
Right.
balances of the aesthetic in terms of what we'll end up making to what like the process of making is.
Right. Before I ask my last
Yeah.
question to Arik, I just want to tell the audience, guys, if you have any questions for Rushad and Arik, please put it in our comments, and we'll be taking some questions once Arik answers my question. Arik, in our discussions when we were talking, you mentioned that nature and light play a very important role, and there are a couple of projects where you're working with light as object. Tell us a little about them, because what is light to you and how does that become such a close subject, and what are these projects that you're working on?
Well, I think light has a material. It's not only for me; it's for all of us. Because if you switch your light off now, we're not going to see you, and if we're going to switch the sun off, we're not going to exist. Light also, in many religious or spiritual way, represents life itself, right? Because light equals life in many ways. But also, sitting on the surfboard at 5:30 in the morning before sunrise or just at sunrise, having the first light hit the water and creating the surface undulation, sculpting actually the, the animated surface behind you and in front of you and within you, has always been attractive for me because light creates our spaces, creates shadows. Shadows creates perspective. Perspective creates depth and thoughts and movement and dimension and time. So the whole time thing is about the light we have around you. You have your light on, I have my light off because I'm in the morning and you are in the afternoon. So
Evening, actually.
evening, yeah, exactly. So, but light, so when you move from light to, I never like to say that I'm designing lamps because a lamp for me is an object of decorative values. It's not negative, it's just different. And light, I would like to design and deal with light, even if it's ephemeral and you cannot grasp it. And walking, the story of walking with a bucket of water and catching the moon, you can practice this. It works to a certain amount of time, but when you get home, the moon is not there in the bucket, right? So I've been dealing with light itself for many years. I've designed, I don't know how many, there's so many different lights, and I keep on working or work. Especially, I have a great collaboration with a company, a Spanish company called Vibia, and we work on the interactivity between light, space, and the space craftsman, which is the architect or the light designer. How will they use? So what I'm trying to do, in many cases, I'm trying to introduce a toolbox, not necessarily a finished product. We also have finished products, of course, but the toolbox is what interests me because then people are using them. We just launched a series of a new system which is called Sticks, which is lines in space that can be oriented and generate different light ambiances and draw in space many different configurations that actually talks about freedom and help that synthetic minimalist spaces I was talking about before, because there's no corners anymore, there's no woodwork, there's no craft, it's just line, and then if the building is not well done, then nothing is straight and it looks terrible and so on. And these objects, that's light objects and the light itself, come to sculpt a new space and give intimacy and gives a focal point, it gives gravity, and so on and so on. Something that flabbergasted me every day and still does is that in the morning, we wake up and light comes through the windows, right? We have light drawing and sculpting the space in a very different way with the sun. In the evening, in the afternoon, we come and we put the light on, so the center of gravity moves from being from sides to top, unless you have a transparent rooftop, which is not necessarily always comfortable. So that is a really interesting thing because it changes the perception of the space. Some spaces looks amazing during day and not great at night, and vice versa, which also puzzles me. When you buy an apartment or a home, for me, it seems essential that you spend a whole night there, to sleep there, to understand the space, to feel the vibes, to see how light is active, and waking up to the new light. We buy what's most important for us, which is our house, only during the day, and then the first time you sleep at the house is like a whole thing. So it was a long answer to your short question, but actually it's not a short question. It's really about a whole, for me at least, the philosophy of how you interact with the light that is around you, and what is your own light. And then you start figuring out that we have our own light, and objects have their light, and this light is emitted. And with this emission, you have to interact. This is why you can bring a lamp that looks fantastic in the shop, picture and you put it in your space, it doesn't work. Not because it's not good, not because it's not beautiful, just because the thing doesn't work together. And you probably, Rooshad, when you do interiors, you're facing this all the time of things that
Absolutely,
look
yeah.
great when we select them and doesn't really work in space. It's puzzling. It's the same for art, same for many things. So we have a feeling to deal with. And light is something that enhances that. Light is something that we can, even when we switch it off, it's still on somehow. That is, that's how I feel.
Rushad, what are your thoughts on light? You've also done a couple of light fixtures, and you've also kind of, I think, while light is not the only subject that you play with, it does find a spot in your designs that you do. How do you view natural light? What is your take on light?
I mean, especially in interior spaces, we look at the light quite a bit. I mean, of course, because, as Arik also mentioned, it does create certain environments, and, you need to control the amount of light coming into a space as well to kind of, really truly encapsulate that light. The way in which you even make perforations or windows, a small shaft or a strong beam of light kind of coming in kind of creates a different kind of mood or highlights a particular space. So that is something that we are quite conscious of while working with spaces. And then, of course, when it comes to products, it's a different kind of quality of light that we are trying to engage in. It's much more ambient and working with how light diffuses out of certain kind of materials. So that's a much more tactile kind of feeling of the light quality. So yeah, I think it's actually like a whole new conversation where how light kind of plays with certain materials and spaces, and how one even getting back to the idea of emotions as well. Like light creates different kinds of emotions
Correct.
for a particular space. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
And on that note,
fundamental
I'm
difference.
sorry,
Sorry,
Arik.
there's a fundamental difference between the past and the present. In the past, when the electricity was not spread all over because we're living in a maze of wires and tubes, is people had a lamp, right, a candle, and they walked.
Yeah.
People walked the light. We walked the light. It was where we were.
Right.
Light was.
Yeah.
Light was there.
Now now it isn't the case. We hardly control it. Actually, I would like to switch all the light down in the evening because I want the city to sleep. I want the architecture to sleep. I want the streets to sleep because you see differently. Now you have all this LED stuff. You have a building, an historical building from the 14th century, and it's red, yellow, and green. I mean, that's what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't make sense. So I think this is a huge difference between. I want just to mention the light, how it was dealt in the film Dune, which is an amazing film. When they walk in the castle, the light is floating above them and flying with them. They walk in the corridors, and the light flies with them. So
Wow.
it's a fabulous metaphor to the past somehow. And I think this is what if we can learn to bring that back, where you control the light where you are, but you actually bring it with you, you create your own shadows. It's quite fascinating.
And on that note, I'm going to open the platform for audience questions. I already have two questions, one for Rushad and one for Arik. Rushad, I'll direct the first one to you. What makes you distort proportion, and how do you conceptualize in that scale? That's a question from one of the audience viewers who are watching us.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Distort
Sure.
proportions.
What makes you distort proportion, and how do you conceptualize in that scale?
I didn't even know that I distorted proportions. Um,
Probably that's the answer.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, sometimes proportions is a bit intuitive as well. Like, the way in kind of, it's also quite experiential how you kind of work with certain spaces. You don't want sometimes, even though ceiling heights are great, you don't want to oversize them in terms of, making spaces. So I think each kind of function, whether product or space, requires a certain sense of proportion. And I probably don't know how I can like pin that down in terms of how we kind of navigate around it, but it is quite intuitive in that sense. It's much more experiential, and that's how we kind of look at it. Yeah, I'm not too sure whether I answered the question, but yeah, I don't quite understand the question to begin with.
Right. Okay. Arik, coming to you, one of our viewers is asking, in your case, would you say form follows feeling instead of form follows function?
Uh, I think in my case, there is no case because at certain, that depends on what we do, as we discussed. Is if you make a fork and you cannot hold it, then it doesn't work as a fork. So it's not going to become a fork, and it's not going to be sold as a fork. So then you make a sculpture that you not necessarily need to give it a function at that from a function point of view, a specific function, then other than beauty or metaphor and so on. So in some cases, form follow the function. In some other cases, function dictate the form or the material because you have a finish, because you have a texture, because you have a density, and so on. So I think there isn't one ruler or one obsession to follow and say, yeah, forms follow function. This is very German and very the definition. But if you, I'll give you an example. You sat in a dinner 30 years ago and somebody sat next to you and said, what do you do? And you said, oh, I'm a product designer. That used to be the answer, product designer. And you knew exactly what it means. He makes this, he makes this, he makes an iron, he makes products, chair, lamp, products. Okay. Today you sit in a dinner, same dinner, different people, and you say to the guy or the girl next to you, so what do you do? And she goes, I'm a designer. And you say, yeah, well, what do you design? He say, well, I design everything. I say, what do you mean you design everything? Well, I do everything. I design. Design is an idea. It's not a thing necessarily. And you say, but can you tell me about something? I say, no, I can't. Everything is confidential. So the thing is that we, no, haven't you said in this one of these dinners lately? So I think there isn't one way, there isn't one answer, there isn't one and only thought that you can engage. You have to engage. It's like cooking. You have so many different spices just to be able to, at the end, get the one single taste that you wanted, that enhances your whole palate in any physical, metaphysical, emotional, and so on, sensorial. And that everything's together. So when you do, if it's a designer that asks this question, or a manufacturer that asks this question, if you do something, as I said, the design is a solving problem system, okay, or solving problem process. So if it's a task, if you have a task to do with scissors, you cannot hold them by the blade. You're going to cut yourself, and that's not going to go, right? And this has to be more or less comfortable to fit more or less amount of people. If you an Indian hand and a hand of somebody from Sweden or from Alaska, it's a different hand. And so globalization wants everything to fit everybody, but it doesn't really. So we are choosing this modus vivendi everywhere. So product, form, and function are something that go together. So if you say that beauty is a function, then it can take any form. We agree. If you say that the function is a keyboard for a computer, then it cannot be this big because you cannot type. At least I can't.
The next question, I think it's for the both of you, whoever wants to take that first. What are your views on sustainable design? Do you think it's just a PR gimmick, or is there really a definition for true sustainable design? And if there is, what are the prerequisites of a sustainably designed product or a space? Rooshad, do you want to go first on that?
I'm older, so I will start.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I'll give an older answer. You'll give a young answer. So, using the word sustainability today as a highlight is a complete overlook of what history of design is. I don't know At least I don't want to know. And maybe there is one or two, but a company or a director, a CEO, whether it is a big company, small company, workshop, manufacturer, whatever, who doesn't want to be efficient, who doesn't want to waste more material, who doesn't want to do things which are holding the time they need to hold, who doesn't want to do to give the function its full potential and so on. It's not new. It's always a task. It's always a task of the designer from the Industrial Revolution to do things better, stronger, more efficient, more up to what they have to function with, to work in the space of time and energy they do. So sustainability is not new. We're just talking about it more. But the talking about it doesn't necessarily bring the solution into it. It's actually a matter of action. And it's a matter of action at every level, and start with a personal action for global impact. This is the only way sustainability can survive. So or become something more than what it already is. And the responsibility is something which is really difficult to do. Because as a creative person, if a company comes and say, design a chair for me, do you have the total ability to say, hey, your technique of manufacturers do not permit you to make a chair in wood or in plastic or whatever that will last more than 6 months. I don't design for you. Did you hear that in
Rooshad.
Harvard or not?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
you
No, I completely agree with you. And when people say sustainability, it's sometimes quite an overloaded word. And it's not always to do with the environment as well. There's sustainability in every aspect, as you touched upon, even like with like wasting of resources or, sustaining whether it's craft or the way in which, just being much more mindful in that sense. So, the way in which every person or practice kind of touches upon sustainability could be quite varied. And of course, to avoid redundancy, whether it's through, effort or resources, material, and how kind of that even translates into, longevity as well. Of course, when that's another problem of everything kind of gets replaced in 6 months or a year. Even the way in which one kind of consumes things needs to be answered. So it's not always from a designer perspective, but also from a consumer perspective of how one looks at things, of not always wanting to replace things or wanting more uh, and things lasting. So yeah, I think sustainability can be seen in quite a few ways and how one kind of imbibes that into their own practice or living, not necessarily just a practice.
Yeah, but the more in more ways you see it, in more ways you have to act towards it. And dealing with furniture, I think there's a very a classic and I think somehow alerting thing we can think of. Of my parents, all of our parents, when they grown up and their parents passed away, there was the question who gets the furniture. The furniture
Sure.
was the value that a family had. Family furniture, except from their house, was the thing because we didn't collect watches. They were not about diamonds. It was just the furniture was people would work their life off to buy that commode or that sort of closets and so on and so on. And sadly, I know people and family that has had gone into crazy fights with each other on the table, on the kitchen closet, on the amazing carved wood something for the living room, right? Do you remember that? Today, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a very bourgeois family, they still keep on moving their 12th century, 14th century, 15th century furniture. And the reason is because the furnitures do not last. This is one of the reasons. So look at auctions. Interesting. Another aspect, look at auctions. Auctions sell today what used to be produced 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. they stopped lasting from the 90s, 2000. What are they going to sell in 30 years? I bet you they're going to keep on selling the same thing they sell today. It's just going to be more expensive because there's something that ended. And this thing that ended is the intensity and the attention we give to everything we do. It's not the commerce, the mass, the global, and so on. All that has reduced a lot of aspects of this. And this is where I think the designer's responsibility, and I do agree with you, sustainability in hundreds of different ways to look at it. But in design specifically, in product design specifically, we talked about very, very specific, tangible aspects of what it is. And we definitely have responsibility, we designers, right? Also consumers, but consumers, they go in a shop. If you make something so beautiful, it's attractive, they want it. If it lasts or not, this is something that we are responsible for, partially.
That's very interesting, Arik. You just said this because while both of you were talking, this was something that I was wondering that the entire heirlooms and the definition of heirlooms has completely changed. I mean, now it is more about the aesthetic and not about the functionality. Where do you think we lost that balance as consumers? And what is it? Do you really think this pandemic is going to be that shifter where people are actually going to relook at how they consume and probably the approach to design, both from the designer point of view and a consumer point of view, is going to change?
I think it's much more also of people wanting.
Go
Sorry, go
on.
ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just saying that, when people want to consume things, they keep it with the intention of wanting to have it changed in a number of years. The mindset of keeping something for eternity now has changed. Whether it is started off with, even brands like, the iPhone, a new tweaked version comes out every year and it kind of forces people to get rid of the earlier one and then, take the other one again. So I think there's that kind of a shift of, even sometimes clothes being cheaper than a sandwich, for example, and fast fashion. So there's completely that switch of the way and the act of consuming. Even sometimes people want their interiors done, every 10 years or 20 years or something like that, which never earlier
Right.
existed. So there's definitely that shift in terms of wanting change, wanting new, and that kind of makes things they want it much faster and cheaper. And I think that kind of that's a big shift, quick and cheap, and that of course doesn't translate into something lasting that long. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation.
Arik,
I don't totally agree, but because there are many examples, so it's hard to generalize. Because you can see some fabulous IKEA products that are fast and accessible and last forever. So I do think it's a question of design, attention, engineering, and so on. But let's answer maybe in a different way related to the pandemic. Is I think the problem well, Karl Marx said that the only freedom we're going to have is to consume, and he was not so wrong, right? Because when you made your money, you can do what you want with it, right? And then
right.
to satisfy yourself, you buy the tape or something else. The problem comes with the tape is okay, right? But when you want to buy a chair and you have to buy it on the internet because we cannot move, because the clothes are shops, because, or you want to buy today, I was nearly killing myself. I ordered tea. But tea, I wanted to smell. I was taking my finger, trying to smell my screen. But I know that because of the new lockdown, I will not gonna get to do that. So you buy a chair, which is something which is to do with your ergonomics and the way you're gonna sit. You buy a chair on the screen. It's completely, it's crazy. It's paradoxical. It doesn't make sense, and so on. You get the chair home, you sit on it, and you say, "Hey, not comfortable. Beautiful, not comfortable. I can't have dinner on this. I can't have a chat on this. I can't sit and work on that. This is a disaster. It's a disaster. It is a disaster. Buying clothes on internet is really problematic. So there's so many things to do with us. So the system to permit people doing it And I'm doing it myself because I'm part of the system. And it's unfortunately what I cannot really try. I need to try. I don't do. I try not to do. But the system became so oiled in that way. They say, okay, you got it. You don't want it. You can send it back. No problem. And then you can send it back in the easiest way they find out, and it's really getting very easy. But there is a lot of damage which is dragged with it. In Europe, I don't know how it is in India, but in Europe, there's this application is called Vinted, where people can sell. Not only you can sell everything else you have at home, and it's grown up mad like eBay or whatever, and there's so many different ones of them. But Vintage, you sell clothing, so kids at 13, 10 years old, 14 years old, they wear their thing. My girls, every 3 months, we need another pair of shoes because they're growing so fast, like every kid, right? So, and shoes are not even used, enough, because you cannot use them enough in 3 months. So, I prefer to give it, or sell it, or buy something which is used in a good condition. It's not really used. A sweater that was worn 50 times, it's not a problem. It's okay. If you buy something new, you are creating so much damage in terms of energy, in terms of loss of energy on people and time and water and. And I'm sure you're all aware of how many liters of water it takes to make one hamburger, or how many liters of water. It's when you start looking at this, it's frightening. We are not looking at where we are. So I think I'm drifting from the question because I'm so overtaken by this, but it is really the problem of not being able to be in physical contact with the things that we are acquiring or want to or desire, and this is a fundamental part of humanity. We want to touch and feel and smell and taste.
And on that note, I think we've gone a little over our time. So thank you so much, gentlemen. I can't tell you how. I've not been seeing the comments, but whatever little my team is putting here, I think there are a lot of designers who've said that they've just loved having both of you on the screen and just hear you speak. So a big thank you to both of you on behalf of everybody who've watched us. Thank you for doing this. I know,
Thank
Arik, you
you.
were really busy and you've taken the time out. And Rooshad, I know how difficult it is for you to have a platform and face the digital space. So thank you, gentlemen, for doing this with us at ID Collective. I've had a great time chatting with you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Nice meeting you
Thank,
all. Thank you so
bye
much.
bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Thank you.